You're right. How's it going? Um, Gonna make another Wastecast video just for shits and gigs. Alexa, pause it. Yeah, so I've been in this hospital in Weston-super-Mare since like the beginning of August. I've been here since, and I was at the main site, and I'm now at the rehab ward, which is called the Lodge. Now, there's this kind of funny thing with mental health funding where they've got something called an integrated care board that used to allocate funding based on the first funder principles. So let's say, for example, you got sectioned in the year 2000 in London, right? And the London NHS Integrated Care Board was responsible for your treatment, your medical treatment in a psychiatric ward. And you got sectioned again in 2025 in Manchester, and you would be funded under this old weird rule by London's NHS Trust, even if it's 25 years later, because they were the first funder that ever looked after you. NHS have their own individual trust to deal with mental health. They have trusts that just deal with mental health. There's two that I've had interactions with, and one of them is called NHS Devon Partnership Trust, which is from Devon, when I lived in Devon in 2019, which is 6 years ago. And there's another one called Avon and Wiltshire Partnership, which covers like most of Bristol, Avon, and Wiltshire, as the name would dictate. So since I've been in hospital here, my ward rounds, which are like meetings that you have once a week, where you go and discuss stuff with people, and they talk about your treatment and your care, have all been attended by people from AWP. So I had an out of area a repatriation coordinator, who attended my ward rounds via Teams, and she worked for AWP. And I've had a care coordinator who attended my ward rounds via Teams, and I think even in person. They've swapped and changed them a couple of times, but they've been AWP as well. At the point where they decided they were going to send me to a rehab, they informed me that my medical funding was coming from NHS Devon Partnership Trust. And I said, I've lived in Bristol since 2021. It shouldn't be an NHS Devon Partnership Trust, should have nothing to do with it at all. But they were like, no, it's still the way it goes. It's still NHS Devon Partnership Trust. And I've had a really sort of poor experience with NHS Devon Partnership Trust. I won't go into all the gory details, and they are pretty gory, and start sort of libelously or slanderously or defamatorily criticising anybody or accusing them of things. But I've had a very poor experience with Devon Partnership Trust NHS, and everyone who works there, especially the senior staff, will know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I got a visit from a psychiatrist, when they said I was going to go to rehab rather than be discharged into the community. They sent a psychiatrist from Devon Partnership Trust to talk to me and see what kind of rehab I needed. He carried out an assessment, and I spoke to him about the funding thing. And I said, look, I've lived in Bristol since 2021. I used to live in Devon. I had a permanent address there in 2019, but I've been of no fixed abode for a few years. And then I've moved to 246 Wells Road in sort of November 2021. And I was there until January 2023, when I was sectioned for the whole of 2023 until the winter of 2023. I was sectioned in, I was taken to Essex at Signet Colchester. Anyway, everyone in my care had been AWP until all of a sudden I was going to a rehab, and then they said that Devon Partnership Trust were funding my care. And I met with this guy, and I asked him why this was, and he wrote me back. He wrote to me and he emailed me and said that my health funding was 100% DPT, but my 117, which is like a package of care to make sure you don't relapse when you leave hospital, which includes accommodations, one of the main things, is going to be with a different trust. Sorry, somebody just doing my orbs on the door there. I could hear the footsteps creaking up the corridor, and I can't include them in these videos. So, yeah, I got another visit from an NHS DPT guy just the other day, and he was a repatriation coordinator. And he came and sat down, and he was very polite, and I explained to him the problems that I'd had with the NHS DPT in quite some detail. And I said to him that I'd done some research, and I was pretty adamant that I shouldn't have anything to do with DPT because I've lived for, it'll be 4 years in November that I've lived in Bristol. And if you've lived somewhere for 3 3/4 years, your place of ordinary residence is what determines your funding allocation with the Integrated Care Board. But for some reason, every time I get sectioned, they always want to I've been sectioned every year since 2019. So 2019, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's at least 7 times. I think, in fact, I've had 9 sections, which basically makes me a credibility vacuum and somebody that you shouldn't, waste your time listening to, obviously. But it is needed sometimes. I mean, I'm going to show you an email, right? So here's the email that I sent to this guy, Mark Stowe, who came to come visit me. And I sent it on the 15th of July during our meeting, which had basically, this was AI generated, but AI has looked at the guidance of NHS Who Pays literature, which was published on the 1st of April, 2024 or 2023, can't remember. I'll read you the email. It said, "Dear Mark, I'm writing to address the current funding arrangement for my detention under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act 1983. I understand that NHS Devon Partnership Trust, DPT, is currently listed as the funding commissioner, despite my having been ordinarily resident in Bristol for the past 4 years. I wish to clearly state that, in accordance with established NHS funding principles and legal guidance, the responsibility for commissioning and funding my current Section 3 detention should lie with NHS Avon and Wiltshire Partnership, as they are the Integrated Care Board for the area in which I am and have been ordinarily resident. Here are the key points supporting my position. Principle of ordinary residence for detentions. The fundamental principle governing responsibility for NHS healthcare funding, including detentions under the Mental Health Act, is a patient's ordinary residence. This is consistently affirmed in the NHS England's Who Pays guidance. Ordinary residence refers to the place where a person has voluntarily adopted a settled purpose as part of the regular order of their life, whether for a short or long duration. My 4 years of continuous residence in Bristol clearly establishes this. NHS England Who Pays guidance, the Who Pays determining which NHS commissioner is responsible for commissioning healthcare services and making payments to providers guidance, most recently updated, was 1st of April 2024. I was a bit blurry on that. Sorry if my speech is a little bit out, I'm really tired. This outlines the rules. For mental health detentions, the responsible ICB is generally determined by where a patient was ordinarily resident immediately before the detention. As I've been ordinarily resident in Bristol for 4 years, my ordinary residence immediately prior to this current Section 3 detention was clearly within the Bristol area, meaning the commissioning responsibility lies with the relevant Integrated Care Board for Bristol, which is NHS, Avon and Wiltshire Partnership, not DPT. Distinction from Section 117 Aftercare and the Supreme Court ruling. It's important to differentiate the funding for a Section 3 detention from that of Section 117 Aftercare services. While the Supreme Court case of R on the application of Worcestershire City Council versus Secretary of State for Health and Social Care 2023 UKSC 31, the Swindon versus Worcester ruling brought significant clarity to the determination of responsibility for Section 17 aftercare services following re-detention. It reinforced the principle of ordinary residence as central. The Supreme Court specifically stated that a Section 117 duty ceases upon re-detention and a new Section 117 duty arises upon subsequent discharge, with the responsibility falling to the ICB and local authority for the area where the patient was ordinarily resident. So if you get sectioned and taken to Leeds, they're not going to get Leeds Council to find you a flat to live in if you happen to be homeless, and they don't want to discharge you onto the street if you're homeless, because you'll probably relapse if you're feeling that you've got poor mental health. So the patient was ordinarily resident immediately before that latest detention. This ruling, while focused on aftercare, Section 117, underscores the legal emphasis on the most recent place of ordinary residence as the determinant for new duties and responsibilities. It does not support a first funder principle for current detentions when ordinary residence has clearly changed. No first funder rule for current Section 3 detentions. The concept of a first funder retaining indefinite responsibility generally relates to ongoing Section 117 aftercare that was initiated by a particular commissioner and may have been subject to complex historical rules prior to the Supreme Court's clarification, does not apply to the funding of a new or current Section 3 detention where a person's ordinary residence is unequivocally shifted. My current detention is a new event triggered by my current circumstances for which the local ICB should be responsible based on my established residence. Practical and ethical implications. Continuing to have DPT fund my detention despite my long-term residence in Bristol creates practical difficulties and is contrary to the spirit of locally delivered care. My local mental health trust, NHS AWP, is best placed to understand and manage my ongoing care needs, integrate with local community services and facilitate my recovery and eventual discharge back into the community where I live. This arrangement ensures continuity of care and the appropriate resource allocation for residents. Therefore, I respectfully request that NHS Devon Partnership Trust reviews my funding status and formally transfers the responsibility for my Section 3 detention funding to Avon and Wiltshire Partnership. My ordinary residence for the past 4 years in Bristol clearly establishes this as the appropriate and legally sound arrangement. I'm available to discuss this further and provide any additional information required. Thank you for your time and attention with this matter. So, like, they gave me a social worker, right? But she wouldn't give me a phone number or her email address. And then I went on Twitter and asked South Gloucestershire City Council. I live in Kingswood in Bristol, I did anyway. And so it falls under South Gloucestershire City Council. And after they said, like, everyone should give you their phone number and their email address, then they said that they'd checked the database over and above that and that there was nothing with my name on it. They said, like, you know, if someone's calling you from a private number, who won't give you an nhs.net email address or a telephone number, and there's no record of you being dealt with by one of our social workers on our system, we would say this person is not genuine. And she then sort of disappeared in a puff of smoke with this kind of malicious communications allegation. So the manager of the other ward that I was on before came up to me. If you watch my previous videos, you'll know this. But yeah, she came up to me, was like, Brody, your social workers received loads of malicious communications. They're really angry at you. And I said that, I made it clear it wasn't me. And I said that we could, like, go through my phone and, like, check all my, you know, digital forensics, go to the police, do whatever they want. Like, we're completely innocent. I haven't sent any malicious communications to my social worker. I liked my social worker. I wanted to work with her, find some support to get accommodation and get the fuck out of hospital. But yeah, after I got that tweet, it kind of, like, they got caught with their pants down with this kind of problematic controversy. And then she was removed from my caseload. And then my care coordinator, or key worker, as they like to call themselves, did the same thing. So he wouldn't give me his direct work number or his email address either. He just told me to use the Avon and Wiltshire Partnership, South Gloucestershire Recovery Team general inbox, which apparently is not monitored according to a communication I received. Anyway, long story short, it's a bit dark, isn't it? Maybe put the light on. Long story short, I shouldn't be treated by Avon and Wiltshire Partnership Trust if they're going to suddenly involve a different trust for no reason at all. And I don't know what to do about it. Or Mark Stone said he's referred it to his superior, and I wrote him another email, which I won't read to you, which does mention some of the gory details of the problems I've had with NHS Devon Partnership Trust. I think that's of a confidential nature, really, but I'm really grateful that the NHS saved my life when I almost died in July 2024 from self-harm. I woke up with tubes in every orifice and my brother looking sort of tearful and relieved next to me, and I owe them my life, you know. And the problem is, it doesn't negate all of the awful shit that's gone on. And awful is a strong word, but, like, it really is awful shit that's gone on with other factions of the NHS, not the intensive treatment unit or the intensive care unit staff, who were amazing and reassured me and nursed me back to good health when I couldn't speak properly because I'd had a tube down my throat for a few days, and when I was shitting myself, they were really friendly and supportive, and they were like NHS heroes, you know, that you kind of expect, you know, somebody who's going to be wielding a cup of tea and a cheese sandwich and a warm smile when you're feeling like the world's about to end because you're terrified in hospital and you've just nearly died. You know, these people are people to be venerated and respected. But mental health trust people are all kind of like, they're different. They're like a different breed of NHS to hospital staff. I swear, like mental health, like psychiatrists and people who work for mental health trust, the way that they kind of, their attitude and the way that they do business is just so, it's worlds apart from the sort of treatment that you get at NHS hospitals. Like, I can't put too fine a point on this. I just find it very difficult because I don't want to kind of tar them all with the same brush. You know, NHS, my mum was a nurse when she died. She was working on Turner Ward, the cancer ward in Torbay Hospital in Torquay. She was on that ward and then she ended up falling ill with cancer and being treated on that ward. She got married on that ward, like sort of 4 weeks before she died. And my brother and I got left with nothing but a made up debt, but that's another story. Tried to rob our house after we lost our mum. And then I was like, no, here's a bit of paper that says that she doesn't owe any money. And then that was just separate kettle of fucking lice. But yeah, I just, I don't know who should be funding my detention, not Devon Partnership Trust. So I'll keep you updated. I'll tell you what Mark Stowe says. I don't know if it's something to do with Mark's toe. Is it a joke name? Like, is he genuine? Does anyone know if he met this guy? If anyone's met this guy, or they know who he is, you know, they can give me an advice. Be great. But yeah, funding, who knows? Bizarre, isn't it? Madness.